All right, now we're at the point where we are going to be able to welcome our keynote speaker from the Eastern Band of Cherokee to the stage. Beau Carroll is the tribal archaeologist for the Eastern Band of Cherokee, and he is the principal investigator as well. And he is going to talk to us today about the Cherokee syllabary within Manitou Cave in Alabama. Beau, where are you? Oh, here we go. Like, please don't make me give your talk. And we are going to have time for questions afterwards. And I think what we'll do is have some runners with the mic so you guys don't have to take the long hike up to the microphone. All right. Thank you, Beau.
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Some hard talks to follow this morning. That NATHPO talk, I just found that and I enjoy listening to it, especially when I'm driving. So it's a good thing for THPOs to have. It's another good thing for people that don't know a lot about THPOs to be able to listen to it. It gives you a good general background, at least the episodes that I've listened to so far. Like I said, my name is Beau Carroll. I'm the lead archaeologist for the Eastern Band Tribal Historic Preservation Office. I think before I get started, I want to say that you guys are my target audience. I always do my work with Indian people in mind, and that is my dream audience. It's not usually that way, especially the area that we live in. We're so far detached from other tribes. There's not a lot of Indian people that's usually in the audience. So I appreciate the opportunity to do this. Just like I said, this is why I do my work. So another thing is that museum visit we had yesterday. I went on the second one, and it got me thinking about the things that I talk about in my presentations. I guess maybe rethinking what I share and how much of that I share about my culture. Not necessarily that I'm going to stop doing that. Just I want to think about it more in depth and kind of gear it towards my audience. So I had already had this presentation wrote out, so it fits perfectly with the audience. So I want to try. I don't like reading to people, so I'm going to try to act like I'm not reading to people, but I'm afraid that if I just wing it, then I'm going to miss something important, and I don't want to do that. It's a disservice to the research, to the history of the cave, and then to the audience. So I'll do my best, I guess. So I'd like to take the time to thank NATHPO for asking me to come give my presentation. The people that made the project possible, my fellow Cherokees who worked on it with me, Dr. Julie Reed and Professor Tom Belt. And I'd like to thank my advisor, Jan Shimmick and Alan Christopher for taking the photo. Today, I'll be talking about a cave that contains, change the slide. Today, I'll be talking about a cave that contains Indian writing. There's a lot of types of Indian writing. Today, we're going to focus on the image to the left. So this writing we're discussing today, it can be dated back as early as 1828. This project used many different fields of study. We use linguistics, archaeology, history, and a little bit of ethnohistory. So my research started with a single panel of syllabary deep inside of Manitou Cave. I'll explain what syllabary is in a second, near Fort Payne, Alabama. It's grown to include many different panels. Each one of these visits would discover something new and new research avenues that encompasses all different fields of study. So first, I give you a little background on Sequoia and syllabary and wheel sound. So we can determine that Sequoia was born in the late 18th century between 1760 and 1776. The location of his birth is accepted as being near Tuskegee town in Tennessee, just outside of Fort Loudon. Scholars estimate at the beginning of the 19th century, Sequoia married and moved to Wills Valley or Willstown, Alabama. Willstown is located in Wills Valley in present town of Fort Payne in DeKalb County, Alabama. Fort Payne is about 50 miles southwest of Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's on the west part of Lookout Mountain. Fort Payne is the county seat for DeKalb County. It's bounded by the states of Tennessee and Georgia. Willstown had become a site for Cherokee Lowertown Council meetings. It was a hub for Cherokee leaders. It was an important place politically. Sequoia wanted to be where he was needed the most. Sequoia realized the importance of his people having a written language. He began developing the Cherokee syllabary around 1809. He attempted several different ways, but ultimately settled on 85 characters or syllables, where each sound in the Cherokee language has a syllable. So you can see the chart and the corresponding sounds beside the characters. In 1820, the syllabary was introduced to Cherokee leaders. It was accepted and adopted as the nation's written language. So the method was so successful that people were able to read and write in a matter of days. The use of Sequoia syllabary was widespread. They tracked it. There are many estimates at the number of Cherokees at the time who could read or write in their own language. It ranged from 50% to 90% of the adult population. And this was quickly, like a month, 2 months time. I was working on these translations before I had ever been in an actual cave. So here in North Carolina, we have different rock formations. Other parts of the US have actual dark zone caves, and I didn't realize what a cave was until I got to a place where lights never hit. So I didn't know how I would react. I'm a touch claustrophobic, and I thought that would affect my ability to be a caver. So I thought I'd love it or hate it. So a couple things came to me before and during my first cave visit. Well, first, for traditional Cherokee people, caves it's different for somebody looking for recreational activities. So caves are portals to the underworld. They shouldn't be ventured into without extreme caution. So there are pollutants that can be picked up while in this other world, and you have to properly cleanse yourself when you exit. So I was nervous. I knew this going in, and I was nervous, both the traditional aspect and just the physical part. So I've always trusted my instincts, and I felt like if I was doing something wrong, then if I felt like I was doing something wrong, I was usually correct. So I've been in caves since then where I felt unwelcome. I felt like an uninvited guest. I never felt this way in Manitou Cave. It struck me that it stayed a constant temperature year round. It made me question why I had been doing archaeology in cornfields in mid-July. Another thing that sealed it for me was I did so much research on this cave, I never had to destroy anything. Archaeology, it's a destructive science. I've always been at odds with that. So my goal is always preservation of my past and my culture. And oftentimes those are at oppositions with each other. So it seemed I no longer needed to destroy my past to learn about aspects of my culture. So to say the least, I was hooked on caves. While I was in graduate school, I was trying to figure out a topic for my master's thesis. And like I said before, I've always been interested in less destructive methods of archaeology. I kind of wanted to focus on that. So I saw other archaeologists using ground penetrating radar like Stephen talked about yesterday. So I saw people using it over large areas with minimal destruction of sites. So I like that idea, not because I was interested in the actual processes, but the preservation part of it. So I went to the library and got some books. And come to find out, most of the stuff is math driven. So I immediately didn't like the project. So math's important. It's just not something I enjoy. So I was already hating my project. I hadn't even started it yet. I took a cave art class for my final project. For my final project, my advisor, Jan, showed me some pictures of writing in his research team had found. He asked me if I knew what it was, and I recognized it as Cherokee syllabary. He asked me if I knew what it said. So I'm not a fluent speaker. I had some trouble. So I took it to my language teacher. We had translated the panel in about 30 minutes. It was fairly easy for someone who is a first language speaker. So the Journal of American Antiquity, September 2011, include a photograph taken by Jan Schimmick of the University of Tennessee in their publication, Talking Leaves and Rocks That Teach, the archaeological discovery of Sequoia's oldest written record. So Winks and Tankersley state, the first line is proper name, Aniyan Lee, which may be glossed over in English as screamer. Further on the third line and to the right of 1828, one finds the word for April or Gubon. The interpretation of this photo is not complete. Key points are left out in the actual meaning of the writing. And Tom Belt, professor of Cherokee language at Western Carolina and fluent Cherokee speaker, interprets it differently. Weeks and Tankersley use Aniyan Lee for the first line. We translate it as leaders or the ones who lead. According to Professor Belt, this is not a glossed over word for screamer. The second line of Weeks and Tankersley is not translated, but this is the key to understanding this message. Tikwana Itzo is a term used for Cherokee stickball game. It can be interpreted as the leaders of the stickball team. Weeks and Tankersley continue on to the third line, which is correctly labeled 1828. One finds the word April, Guboni, but only half the syllables are translated. Guboni Kanla are in their month. What looks like an illegible syllable is actually an English number 30 with ega meaning day. So this particular picture, the words leaders or you will lead, stickball, 1828 in their month, the 30th day. So in the Cherokee languages, sentences are formed backwards from English sentences. So if I want to say, I want water, I'm a aguaduli ha. If you translate it to English, it's water I am wanting. Naturally, dates would be used in the same method. So the interpretation had several important factors that exist in the background. Understanding Cherokee worldviews gives you an insight that other researchers don't possess. The stickball term being an old term that isn't being used anymore. The use of in their month. Think Cherokees don't view time in months, but rather seasons. So I think I took that as a stab towards that. So another thing is I have a date. I remember a reporter interviewing me one time, and they asked me how I came up with the date. They wanted to know if I used destructive analysis, if I had scraped a part of the charcoal off the wall to carbon test it. And I thought, you haven't read my paper. First, I said Sequoia submitted the syllabary in 1820. I have a date of 1828. I'm pretty confident if I use some Indian science and a little common sense, I can narrow that down better than a carbon date. So a lot of these are hard to say, so I'm gonna do my best. Ayan si li tas. So we translated this as I'm your grandson. So this would be a way of writing that focused on what we call the old ones or the ancestors who come before us. It's not a literal translation. It would be, you could use it in prayers or medicinal formulas. This phrase was written on a ceiling about midway through the cave. So the ancestors aren't humans like us, they're older, and they were here before the Cherokee. They're powerful and they often give us gifts such as cures for sickness and knowledge. We include them in many of our ceremonies. So to the bottom right, you can see myself and Professor Julie Reed as scale for the placement of the writing. So it's about 35 to 40 foot up. It's under a small ledge, and the ledge is about 10 foot from the writing. So you see the ledge there. So it's about 10 foot from there. And to be able to write this, you have to lean out over it. And I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but if you think how far you are in the cave and how long it's going to take you to get to whatever doctor they had at the time. So it would have been a fairly big deal to write it at that time. So when I was trying to figure out how difficult it would be to place this artwork there, I had first asked experienced caver Alan Kressler. He told me he wasn't sure how they wrote it there. And second, I asked Tom Belt. He said a long time ago, people could do things that other people today could not. These people would have been extremely powerful. They could do impossible feats such as flying. Then he told me that just because you couldn't get up there doesn't mean they couldn't. So that the first one was scorched with a torch or a lantern. And then they had scratched to show a clear with a background. So the translation was difficult. We haven't completed it yet, but it's believed to refer to Dakshi, meaning turtle. The others are written backwards, like writing that could be held up in a mirror. So we find Sasa, Goose's signature there, along with the writing. There's another cave in the same geographical area, and it's the same signature. So I have a pretty good feeling that's the same person that's writing in both of these caves. So the writing and the ceiling being backwards, I took to be explained by viewing caves as portals to the underworld. So everything would exist, but it would be reversed. Words would be written backwards with phrases. Everything would be a mirror image. Cold would be hot, light would be dark. Certain types of prehistoric Cherokee art in caves depicts animals upside down. So if you're standing and looking up, it's like they're swimming above you. So if you're in the water below, so these translations have more to offer as far as insight into Cherokee mining lives. So if I continue to study these, I think it'll provide more key components within Cherokee cosmology and lifeways. So this particular panel, the syllables are maybe a half an inch tall. So they're very, very small, and they're kind of up under a ledge, maybe 3 foot off the ground. So in order to find them, you had to be crawling on your back, looking up, just at everything. So they're, like I said, they're really hard to see. We wouldn't have found them if we hadn't have found the other syllables before them. So the signature with the following syllables were incised into the rock. Mr. Richard Guest. This is the hardest one. Digiya naska wo diga ho duglan tungi. We who are those that have blood come out of their nose and mouth. Ayan si shi ki guns. I'm a respectable man or man of authority. I like that. So here's an enhanced version. So we take I have a app on my phone called D-Stretch, and you take a picture and it manipulates the colors till you can get it to stand out. So that's one of the manipulated pictures. And then here's one where we just filled in what we thought was missing. You can see how it lines up really well. So I had a feeling that the signature said guest, but I didn't have another signature to match it to. I wanted it to be him, but I wasn't sure, so I just didn't really say anything about it. And then over the course of me working on this project, I had talked to a lot of different colleagues. I had shown Dr. Brett Riggs of Western Carolina University these pictures. Dr. Riggs loves to dig. He loves to dig so much, I've heard him called Ugana Unega, the white groundhog. He just happened to be in the National Archives digging and came across this signature. One night I got a random email, and when I looked closer, I was fairly confident that the signatures matched up. It was in fact Richard Guest, Sequoia's son, that wrote this. See, it matches up well. So this particular panel gives us a great amount of information in regard to the people surrounding the cave and what the cave was used for. So the cave's location is an area known as Willstown by the Cherokee. It is believed that this was a location that Sequoia invented the syllabary. With the information from the Stickball panel in the same cave providing context, this was interpreted to mean that the ones who would bleed from the nose and mouth would have been a stickball team that had suffered a defeat. A ball team that had suffered a defeat would be injured, and most would literally have bloody noses and mouths. This goes directly with some of the other writing in Manitou Cave. This could be a secretive location used to prepare for the game and to be doctored after. So like today, Cherokee doctors specialize in certain things such as headaches, physical mobility, love spells, and stickball. So here we have a team near the Cherokee Indian Reservation. They're preparing to play. To the left, we have the doctor of this particular team preparing for the game. The stickball game is played for many different reasons. The game is also known as the little brother of war. It's used for young men to practice both preparation and hand-to-hand combat. So in Cherokee traditions, there are two states of existence, white state or a peace one, the one that we're in the majority of the time. So during the ceremonies leading up to the game or the war, Each participant is put into a red state or a war state. So this would be used for protection for an upcoming game or battle. So you are preparing to take a life or have your life taken. You don't want to be around people of the opposite state because they conflict with each other. It could weaken or transfer to yourself or someone else. So the need for seclusion to properly prepare to be in this state. And then once you are in that state, the need for seclusion to separate yourself from those in the opposing state. And at the end, when you need to get rid of that state and return to the state that you previously came from. So just for the need for this type of seclusion alone is enough to seek out places such as caves to prepare. Each team would have a designated medicine man or doctor that specializes in stickball medicine that would help them get ready for the game. So like an example, modern westernized medicine, they have neurologists and optometrists. Cherokee medicine men would be proficient in one area of medicine. When Cherokee doctors are concerned, the people who play the game aren't that important. It's a contest between the strength of the two doctors of each team, and whoever wins that battle wins the game. Richard Guest, the son of Sequoia, could have been this medicine man or leader for the ball team from Willstown. He could have written this on the cave wall after a particularly important, tough game. So we do know that by his signature, the fact that he wrote it in first person points to Richard Guest, Sequoia's son, being the author of this particular panel. Richard Guest can be found in the area surrounding Willstown on the 1835 census, living on Raccoon Creek in Georgia. Raccoon Creek is about 50 miles southwest of Willstown. The fact that all over the cave graffiti appears dating back to the 1800s. Richard, like everyone else, just wanted people to know that he had been there and had suffered a loss. Due to pressures from surrounding missionaries, the state and federal government, for the Cherokees to continue to assimilate into white culture, many Cherokee traditional practices were banned, so the need for seclusion was needed even more. The preparation for the Cherokee ball game has always required seclusion due to the contamination from outside influences. Cave was being used as a location for preparation by the team and for seclusion to continue to practice traditions by the Cherokee. So here's a map of each author where they lived and the cave's location. They're fairly close, and then they line up well with some of the older trails. So every time we go into a cave, we always find something new. I don't think people were thinking of finding syllabary within caves, but once you start to look at it, it shows up everywhere. These caves were filled with modern graffiti without tribal consultation and a working knowledge of Cherokee traditions. This syllabary can be misinterpreted or overlooked. Tribal collaboration, not just consultation, was the key to understanding this syllabary. It could serve as another example of how important it will be in the future. So this project included different Cherokee scholars, some native Cherokee speakers, and elders. This is a community research project, and new syllabary discoveries are happening nearly every time a cave is visited. Our work with the community will continue. So I'd like to talk about what it felt like to work in this cave. When I first started this work, I was just interested. I wanted to know what the translations were. You know, I was really curious. I was excited to be able to know what it said. Then I started to think about how Cherokees interacted with places such as caves. And I never thought about this in depth until I started going into places like this. So this project gave me a better understanding of my own traditions. It made me realize that not much has changed in the way we practice those traditions, just like our ancestors had done before us. So I'm excited about how much we retained of our culture while it was trying to be destroyed. I can read these messages almost 100 years later. I still have a good grasp on what they were talking about. All of these things made me feel good about Cherokee traditional culture being alive. When I started looking into the area where this cave is, all the historical significance, I learned a great deal about important Cherokee figures. I have a better understanding of how the Cherokees were proactive in the face of oppression and removal. So when you read history books, Cherokees are never actors in their own story. It's always told from the outside looking in. Cherokees have to react to an outside influence. I'm sure this is probably true with every Native American tribe. This research was never that way. This story was created by past Cherokee, researched by the present day Cherokee for present and future generations. So in my experience, not many of these research projects exist. So as with all of my work, I experience it with a wide range of emotions, and they always end the same. an overwhelming sadness about what my ancestors had to go through, turned into a feeling of gratitude for the sacrifices that they made for me to be able to talk about this today. So I think closing, I wanted to talk about the importance of just doing archaeology for Native people. I think that regardless if we participate or not, our ancestral past is going to be studied. We can look at the history of archaeology and see that. And I think it's extremely important for us to get tribal people working in archaeology, anthropology, so we can have a voice when it comes time for us to be able to dictate how we want our ancestral past studied. I think yeah, kind of lost my thought, but hopefully you guys got questions, because
This thing on? Yes, it is. Thank you, Beau. That was amazing. I was totally riveted. I don't know about the rest of you, but I want to give him another round of applause because that was just fantastic.
thank you.
You never know what you're going to get with keynote speakers, and it's always great when you get one that you actually want to listen to. So I hope we have questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Okay. Let me grab this mic. And while I'm walking over here, I'm just going to say that when you were talking about the one that said we're the leaders of the stickball leaders, I was totally thinking of the Super Bowl, and I was thinking of people who are really into their team, and I would interpret that as just kind of like, we're the best at stickball, you know, that it was kind of a brag and a boast on the wall, like I would say about the Chargers if they didn't suck. So here you go, Ann.
Thank you. Beau, you did a great job. A question, you mentioned that you used D-stretch. How many layers did you find once you exposed that D-stretch?
I want to think what these stretch only had on my phone. It only has like 10 layers. I think I might have went through 3 until it popped that out. But I usually go through all of them. There might be 2 that are extremely helpful. I guess it depending on the way they made it, if they incised it or if they used charcoal.
So the use was with charcoal that they used, charcoal?
Yeah, I mean, you just get a piece of charcoal and wet it, make like a paste out of it, and then use your finger.
But,
or I'm thinking that the way they got that on the ceilings, they put it on the end of a stick, but I like them flying up there and putting it on better, especially the goose.
what do you believe the paste that they used? Was it coniferous sap? What would the paste have been, the base?
We haven't tested it for that, but I'm assuming depending on what you were wanting to achieve would be what you would use. It's pretty good ways in the cave, and you only carry a bunch of water. So I don't know if you'd want to use your water. There's also water in the cave. You could use it. You could use spit. I know that archaeologically people have used blood, certain bodily fluids. So I'm assuming depending on what you're wanting to achieve by making what you were making, and then only the person that was practicing that would know. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Hi, I have a question. What is the land manager, what is the agency that the park is in? And has there been a problem with looting and vandalism?
So the cave is a show cave. It's privately owned. They had excavated a lot of it in the early 1900s. They would have to give you a idea of scale, they had balls, so they would bring in orchestras, and they had a room cleared out with a dance floor. They had electricity run in it, and they would take tours up until maybe the 90s. And then I think the cave changed hands a couple times. The tribe got involved and put a humongous gate. I wish I had a picture of it, but put a humongous steel gate over the front. So now it's tours by appointment only and nobody else gets in there. It's watched pretty closely. So I'm glad for that. That a lot of times we use unnamed cave. So you would use unnamed cave and a number, and that's due to it not being protected or having a gate. This one has a pretty substantial gate, so I feel confident talking about where it is and what the name is. The tribe doesn't manage the cave. It's owned by a lady in Alabama, a private landowner. The tribe up until recently sat on the board. So we try to interact with it as much as possible and help consult on how, I guess, how it should be treated and managed. So we have a hand in it, but we don't manage it. Yeah.
My question is, how big is the cave, number one? And number two, the name is very interesting to me, and I'd like to know, it's named Manitou Cave. What else have you found in there related to the name?
I think I heard the question. How big is the cave? I want to think that I found the first writing we found was maybe close to a quarter mile, maybe. It's a good ways. So that part of Tennessee has the most extensive cave systems in the world. I don't even know how. I've never been to the back of the cave, and you can walk for a pretty good while. See, the second part of the question was about the name Manitou. I think they just Indianized that whenever they started taking people into tour. So it sounded, I think it sounded better than a Cherokee name. It sounded Indian, so they would get more people to come. I think that's why it's called Manitou. But I looked into that, and I want to think it's an Algonquin word. Yeah, it doesn't have a meaning in Cherokee.
Julie, go ahead.
John? Here. First of all, as a fellow Cherokee, thank you, Beau, for doing this research. It's important. I live in Oklahoma, so all this information that you guys research and share for us Oklahoma Cherokees is so important. But knowing how well connected you are with the community here, what was the community's response to something this significant and important? And what were the elders' response to what you had discovered and your participation as a tribal member to lead that discovery?
So a lot of the elder Cherokee people knew about it in like the infancy when I first started. So they already knew kind of what was going on, and I'll just periodically go back to them and talk to them about, well, this is what I think. Is this appropriate for me to talk about? So I do that a lot. So that they were pretty well in the loop. I think when it came out publicly, it was kind of a big deal. I remember when you turn your iPhone on and it has the news, I remember it popping up as an article, and that was surprising. And then I probably did 6 or 7 interviews the day that it was released, which I had been talking about it probably 3 years before that paper had been released. It had been part of my research that I was going around talking about. The people that I were talking to were excited about it. But I think more non-Cherokee people were extremely excited about it. Like, I mean, the Cherokee people thought it was cool and they were interested in it, but it kind of blew up, and it surprised me that I thought I've been presenting about this for 3 years, and I remember being in a room and there being like 10 people in there, and now all of a sudden, like, people are beating my door down wanting to talk to me about it. It's pretty strange.
Over here.
Hey, well, that's a little loud. I had a question about sorry, that's cracking me up. The game, you think it was, they had lost? Like George Guess's team had lost the ball game prior to writing the syllabary.
So I rode around that town a lot of times looking for a place that they could actually play ball. And I wanted to find historical records of them and play them, but I haven't found it yet. I just assumed that they lost. Just the feeling I got from the way the writing was, and then what they were talking about. I think you'd have more along the lines of talked about how you won or who you beat, or instead of, well, we're bleeding. And they wrote it really small where you couldn't see it. So it wasn't like so they wrote the first one about Stickball, and it's pretty big. And then the next one they wrote, I think, was tiny. So it wasn't like they were like, hey, look, we won kind of thing. This is a feeling I got.
Hello. I'm gonna ask a question, if you could hear me. It's weird to have an echo. So you said that these caves are by appointment only for tours. Since the writing on the wall has to do with Stickball, is there opportunity for the TIPO to kind of influence? I know that there's a lot of trending things going on for revitalization of different things, Stickball being one of them. I think it'd be kind of cool to have some teams and come and check those places out. You know what I mean? Just to kind of have like some kind of interaction with your office and the community. Some of the, you said that when you do a lot of presentations, most of the time it's with non-native people. I think that it'd be a benefit to create opportunity to have I don't know, I guess influence a welcoming space for younger people to be reintroduced to their ancestors' ways of life.
I think I got the question to see. So the cave is closed by appointment. It's not necessarily for tourists. I think she's pretty choosy about who she lets go in there. It's not just anybody. I know, I think I've heard a couple school groups being able to go in there. The back panel, the one about Stickball, the first one that I showed, it's fairly difficult to get to. So not a lot of people get to see that. It's a good ways back in the cave, almost where it ends. And then a lot of the stuff is like we've seen on the ceiling, that's about halfway, so you can't get to it. Yeah, it would be. I think we're working on, the tribe has been working on being more involved with the management and who actually gets to go in the cave and how they interact with the things that are in there. It's difficult because it's a good ways away. It's over 4 hours. So it's hard for us to physically be involved as much as we would like to. But right now we're working on being able to give Cherokee people more access, and then kind of limiting, I guess, non-Indigenous people. Maybe not limiting, but kind of paying more attention to who goes in there and who doesn't. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
I have a question. Well, maybe not a question. Anyway, I'm following her line of thought is how are you connecting your young people that are tribal to educate them and make them feel a part, because as we all know, it's hard to find people to follow us in this line of work. And I think that your involvement specifically to connect your young people, your younger people, whether they be in the high school or the middle school, to connect themselves and see themselves in this cave. So I guess, what's the educational value for your own people?
We try, I try to get younger people involved. It's kind of hard to keep younger people's attention these days. I was probably the same way, but it just seems difficult now that I'm trying to do it as opposed to it being done to me. I think just, I want to be there. I want to be in the community. I want to be visible. I want people to know who I am, and I want them to know that they can come and talk to me about whatever they want to talk about. When I started doing archaeology, I wanted to do it for my people, because I feel like archaeology is hurt a lot of, anthropology has hurt a lot of Indian communities, and I wanted to use that same thing that's hurt a lot of our people and turn it around and use it to help us. I've seen a lot of value in some of the things that were coming out, but they were just going about it the wrong way. I wanted to change that, and I wanted to be able to provide answers for people that were looking for answers that might not necessarily be heard. I can get lost in the long questions to see. The value. So, like I said, I want to be visible. I talk to school groups when school groups want me to talk. I'll pretty much talk to anybody if they'll listen to me talk. I don't like public speaking necessarily, but I do it because I feel like it's important and it's the best way for me to get my message out. Right now, I've just been kind of geared towards academia, not necessarily my own people's youth, but I've been trying to talk to other archaeologists about the importance of tribal collaboration, not just consultation. I want to show within my work how, if you do include indigenous people in your research projects, how you can benefit from it and how you have a more complete picture of what's going on. Like, it's never made sense to ignore a whole data set, and that's what scientists have been doing. Social scientists have been doing, is just not talking to indigenous communities. It just didn't make sense to me. So I think that that's a good question to think about. Just me being visible and knowing that they could come talk to me. And then just like, I want to see more younger people at traditional things, ceremonies and things like that. They seem, when they come there, they seem more receptive. So I like to talk to them there too. Well, but I think to answer your question, just me personally, I'm just trying to be visible and talk to as many people as I can. As far as the tribe, engage in youth, we have immersion schools, and there's a lot of traditional curriculum that's inserted into school curriculums that wasn't there when I was in school. So not exactly sure how successful that is, but it's just because I haven't looked at it yet. Again, I hope I can answer your questions because I'm trying really hard.
Bo, I was wondering if you could say anything about whether you've noticed more Native students that are becoming interested in anthropology and archaeology, and how do schools in the region, help get students to follow in your footsteps in terms of Native people actually doing their own research?
Well, for a long time, I was one of them only, or actually the only Eastern Band archaeologist that there was. And then Haley, I got another from the museum. She's got archaeology background. Then she showed up. So then there was 2 people. So it's like, so yeah, we got like a 50% success rate or something like that. I want people to, I want to present my work and I want people to think it's interesting, like I find it interesting. And I think that if I do that and I talk to the right people, that I'll just, generate this level of interest where people will want to do what I'm doing. I mean, I didn't start my career to save the world. I started it because I was generally interested in what I was doing, and I didn't want to get up and go to work every day and hate my job. Like I knew when I was in undergraduate, I knew that I could take classes and do something that I didn't like and didn't make a difference and make a lot of money. I just didn't want to do that. It was like one day I was taking classes by the description in the booklet. And if I thought it was cool, I would take it. And then I just ended up looking one day and it was all anthropology classes. So I thought, well, I want to know what anthropology, I didn't even know what anthropology was. So I looked it up and it was the broad study of humankind. I was like, that's perfect. Like I can do anything with that. And I mean, for some reason, I like digging through people's trash. I don't know why, but perfect fit.
Hi, Buju, Nibingisa Sequoia Indigenous, Wabijay Dodam, Saginaw and Keen and Donjiva. It's nice to be here. I am from Central Michigan, from the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe, and we have we co-manage the Sanilac petroglyphs with the Department of Natural Resources. And I was just wondering if you have any type of agreement with the private landowner. And I guess maybe thinking what's going to happen when she passes, how will you co-manage that? I know with us, we co-manage it. It's all documented, signed by our tribal chief. There's certain things that we work together. One of the things that we did was unfortunately put a like a ceiling over it to try to protect it. It's very big. It's probably like maybe if you put all of these tables and chairs together, that's how big the petroglyphs are. But in doing that, the bats came, and so the bats roost under there, and now the waste is hurting the rocks, so we have to come up with another plan. But I guess my question is, do you have an agreement with the private landowner, and what's going to happen when she passes? Maybe there in the future you could purchase the land from her. I don't know. Just my question.
So as of right now, it's like it's still an ongoing process. So we're working with the landowner. As far as purchasing it, I know that we are trying to get a cave conservancy involved. There's some endangered species. I think maybe salamanders that live in the cave. So they're kind of interested in co-managing it with us, which I think would be really cool. It would get part of our natural resources involved. So it would have like a dual program as far as tribal programs. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing. We don't necessarily have an agreement kind of ironed out, but we're working on that too. So we're looking towards it. It's difficult because there's so many sites. Like I can think of at least 10 within like a mile or 2 miles from you. So it's like, that's 4 hours away. There's not just that cave, but now I realize this is an important cave, and the stuff that's written in that cave is really important. As a tribe, we're trying to purchase mound sites. So we're working really hard as far as first acquiring these sites, and then we have to work on protecting the sites. We have a historic sites keeper, Joe Griffin, one person that I mean, we as an office kind of team up to provide security, but he's the main one that checks on sites. And I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of sites within driving distance. So it's extremely hard to be able to own all of this and then manage it the way it needs to be managed. So we need to enter in partnerships with other people. So like you said, they put the thing in for the bats to roost. I do parts of NATHPO. We recently filled a cave full of cement so people wouldn't be able to get back in it. So it's like, I don't know, it just depends on what your goal is, I guess, and how you look at, I guess, how you want to manage the properties. I don't know. If I don't answer your questions, come and find me after this, and I'll probably ramble the same answer but I'll try.
Yes, good morning. My name is Bill Quackenbush. I'm from the central Wisconsin area. And it's interesting. First of all, thank you for coming and standing before us here, because we're very critical on some of the things that you talk about up there. And so from central Wisconsin, oftentimes our culture is just a little bit different, but I don't think we're much different in the fact that a lot of our tribes have been greatly assimilated at the time of when for example, the language began to be written over in this country, right? We've already been subjected to a lot of, the removals, we've been subjected to a lot of different things where we have lost temporarily, hopefully, a lot of our culture and our connection to our environment. And for this one matter, where they took this written language now and placed it up on the stone, because this at their time was a way that they were still attempting to try to remain culturally connected to their ancestral, ties to their region. It's important to remember that, they were replacing a lot of their traditional practices when they were doing such. In Wisconsin, for example, we have areas we call spirit stones, where men would meet together, and this is where they talk about their upcoming events, how they're either going to war, or something as simple as how they were going to play their next little warrior game, this lacrosse game that we call over in our area. So it's important to know that these sites, in short, are sacred sites before that period of time, during that period of time, and even today. And though we've been greatly assimilated, that we still feel that we need to remain connected to these very sites. And you mentioned about, and other people had asked the same question, that, are the ancestral folks interested in bringing their youth there to learn a little bit more about their culture, to regain a cultural component, for example, that they may have lost through the assimilation process. And it's important for you to work with, and your other interest groups to work with the tribal communities. And you mentioned how hard it is to concentrate on this one site to protect and preserve, but to perpetuate it as well, right? But you have to start somewhere. And if it's already started, you have to increase that process by those, and I hate to use this term, those little baby steps forward through preservation. But in short, I guess what I'm getting at is that at every turn of the development of the process for educational outreach, for example, you need to include that tribe or tribes or the groups of people that, are the most interested in utilizing this site for what originally was for. Now, we have rock shelters and caves and such in our region as well. Anything around the Great Lakes region actually has these places where these are places where we were, brought to through thousands of years there to connect to those entities and deities, or whatever you want to call them, that guide us through life. The earth itself, our mother, the earth, she's alive and she's a breathing thing. And these areas where they come there, to get away from, everything else there, to gain guidance and direction and those spiritual medicines that we still need today, right? That water that flows to that stream there, the connection to the earth itself. Those are the things that we don't necessarily go after it in a great way today, but we still require to do so. So in short, first of all, I'm glad you're working with the tribal communities, and protecting and preserving the site here, and that perpetuation, that third P, that's the most difficult thing for all of us to address. But you have to find ways to do that. And you can't let the almighty dollar get in your way. You can't let the land ownership get in the way. You can't let these little things that we see that society puts in as road hurdles today get in the way. You need to look above and beyond that process. And if it's just a matter of me coming over here from Wisconsin and meeting with you in that cave tomorrow, I'll do so. I'm kidding. Everybody can do that. But yeah, so one of the things that I heard a lot of questions here about was, what of this or what of this? Why aren't you doing that and everything? But also I heard some encouraging comments towards the support and the continued work that you're doing up there. So thank you.
So I'm thinking I'm getting the question, the question, the recurring question now. So I know that other caves, we have been working on 3D imaging. So we 3D scan the whole cave. You can recreate it. You can, I did a cave where we went through and made it where it could be VR, so you could view it through VR. So this cave is probably a good distance away from us and a good distance away from the Cherokee tribes in Oklahoma. It's hard to get kids together to be able to get them to this cave for them to physically go and see it. So we developed this technology with the VR so they can, elderly people that might not have the income to make it to the cave, they can all view it from their home or wherever they have a VR, maybe school. And then we've talked about maybe printing part of the cave, life size. I think that was like a conversation we're having with the museum, where you could actually walk into the chamber, and it would be a 3D print. So there are educational opportunities. I'm just not very good at answering questions. That is a couple of the ways that we're working on educating youth, at least giving them the chance to be able to experience things like this. So thanks for your question.
Last question over here.
I asked a question earlier about Manitou. Manitou is, of course, a great spirit. Okichi Manitou, great spirit. The name of the cave is, to me, very important. When I looked it up, I found out that the cave is only a part of the Spirit Mountain. I also found out that you have a great possibly ceremonial center there within the cave. My father's people have caves as well. They are significant. They're very, very important to our culture and understanding. And I think that there's things that are going on in that cave that we all need to hear more about and be a part of, and we're going to encourage you to dig deeper. That cave to Cherokee people, from what I understand, is a sacred location, an old location, an important location. And I would encourage you to dig back into the history of your people and find out the secret messages and the reason why it's called Manitou Cave and why it's found in the Great Spirit Mountains. There's something there for you, and there's something there for you to share with us in the future. I encourage you to go on with your studies. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we are so grateful to you, Beau, for your conversation with us today. Let's give him one last round of applause. Thank you so much. And it sounds like you're going to be available for us to have more conversation with. He's around. Okay, I think I just have this one. All right. So it doesn't say in the agenda that we have a break, but we did have a little bit of wiggle room there so we could have extra questions, which is terrific. But let me run back up on the stage real quick.